The oldest cemetery in the Louisiana Purchase resides in Natchitoches as a memory keeper of the state's origins. Today, the American Cemetery welcomes the public for walking tours of the grave sites and a walk back in time. Upkeep is a labor of love by a volunteer organization that has maintained the city-owned grounds for more than a century. I'm taking you on a stroll through the past and present of life in Louisiana. The American Cemetery sits on the former site of a French colonial fort in Natchitoches. Today, a wrought iron arch greets visitors from its 2nd Street entrance, where people of all creeds, colors, and social statuses share common ground in death. Hi.
Hi.
You must be Payne?
I am. Payne Williams. Nice to meet you.
Williams. Well, thank you for taking a break on this day. I know you're out here doing maintenance on the grave sites, working up a sweat.
We are a little bit today.
But you are a historian that actually wrote a book about the American Cemetery, so you are the perfect person to talk to and give us a tour. Payne Williams grew up in Natchitoches and continues his family legacy of caring for the American Cemetery. His great-grandmother, Eliza Payne Williams, was president of the American Cemetery Association, a group of volunteers who formed in 1904 to maintain the city-owned graveyard. How old is the American Cemetery?
Well, the oldest grave that we have marked is 1797. But we think there's gravestones that would have been, or burials that would have been well before that.
So they say this is the oldest cemetery in the Louisiana Purchase.
It is the oldest European cemetery, yeah. So this is where the initial French residents and so forth were buried in these grounds.
We stop at the gravesite of Dr. John Sibley, who donated the land for the American Cemetery.
He was a Revolutionary War soldier. He was sent by President Jefferson to this area to work as an Indian agent. And so he was writing letters back to President Jefferson before the Louisiana Purchase, in which he was explaining about the area, the various Indian tribes, the cultures, the food. And when he died, he donated the property to the city.
Some people find cemeteries creepy. I find them fascinating as time capsules of history, and the American Cemetery tells Louisiana's story from the start.
The cemetery has people buried here that were in every war, from the Revolutionary War, through the Civil War, through the Korean War, through Vietnam, all the way up until just recently. And so this is the Russell family, and they were members of the Confederacy, and they're buried here.
The cemetery is open to the public for walking tours with a self-guided map. This plaque marks a popular spot to stop and look around. It was the scene of a funeral from the 1989 movie Steel Magnolias, which was filmed in Natchitoches.
All the way to Texas and back, but my daughter can't.
As we walked the property, I noticed several fenced-in areas surrounded by clusters of family graves, all tied to tragic tales of untimely deaths.
And so you have 4 members just in this area here of the Tucker family who all died before the age of 2. And then over here you see several more right here. And so I think we counted at one point maybe up to 8 or 9 of the family members that had died at a young age. Most of these that we see here were in the late 1800s, and it just shows you how tough life was back in the day.
Wow. Many of Natchitoches' notables were also laid to rest here, including former Mayor Theodore Edward Pullman, who was assassinated in 1922 by a disgruntled landowner.
He found Mr. Pullman on, I think it was St. Denis Street, and shot him.
From humble headstones to the chiseled tree stump designs on grave markers of modern Woodmen of America members, to the large stone monuments, people from all walks of life found their final resting place here.
The initial grave that really caught my attention was the one we're going to see next, which is John Gideon Lewis. He was born in Toronto in 1851 and then eventually made his way to Natchitoches, and he started the Prince Hall Masons, which is a group that has a significant amount of members. And so he had their newspaper started here. This is the only mausoleum we have in the American Cemetery. He died in 1931, and so for this gentleman who was black to have the only mausoleum in the cemetery, obviously it shows the respect that he had from the entire community.
Absolutely.
And throughout the state too.
The American Cemetery, with its modern-day homages to deceased loved ones and historic relics of iron crosses and weathered headstones, chronicles early life in Louisiana and continues to serve as the final resting place for the community. Any idea how many bodies are buried in the American Cemetery?
A couple thousand for sure. We have a map that shows where every marked and unmarked grave is.
Can bodies still be buried in this cemetery, or is it closed for business?
It's gotten to the point where if it's not closed, it's very close to being closed. And so what we're going to have to do is inspect some of the areas where we're in the old, what we call the old section, and look and see if we have any area that we think may be available. But at this point, it's pretty much sold out.
Sold out.
If that's the right
No
phrase.
more real estate in the American Cemetery.
Well, everything's negotiable. So,
Might help with those preservation dollars.
it might, yeah, exactly.